After a recent Xkcd comic claimed that nobody needed to read that much about Admiral Daala for their job, I promised I would read that much about Admiral Daala for my job and make this video. So here we go. The main details of Natasi Daala's early life come from the Essential Guide to Warfare, which got expanded on in an online supplement called the Author's Cut. According to these sources, she was born on the planet Irminu, famous for its seafaring naval traditions, as a member of its feudal aristocracy. Her family was wiped out by a rival family when she was just a baby, but she was secretly spared by a son of the rival family and sent to an orphanage run by the Imperial Commission for the Preservation of the New Order, or Comp Nor, on the planet Bodajev. In 3 BBY, she enrolled at the Imperial Academy on Karita, where her record of brutalizing opponents in both sports and interpersonal combat won her entrance to the Stormtrooper program. When her full contact method of interpersonal combat was revealed to translate well into capital ship combat as well, Chief Instructor Massimo Tag looked into her record and discovered the stormtrooper responsible was, and this is the book saying it this way, not me, quote, a tall, attractive redhead, end quote. He then had her transferred from her stormtrooper trainer Visk to his naval officer course. This is going to be a kind of common theme for Daala, where she is in some ways discriminated against and held back for being a woman, while also gaining pretty creepy attention from male superiors, who then take her under their wing with some pretty creepy, explicit, or implicit undertones, when she is, and this cannot be stressed enough, a teenager. In the officer course, she became a polarizing figure. Visk was still upset that she'd been taken out of the Stormtrooper program, and his supporters were among her detractors as an officer. She gained significant positive attention through written analysis of the Tarkin Doctrine, however not all performance reviews were positive. She was often criticized for her tactics being effective largely because of logistical superiority and a willingness to make significant sacrifices among her own forces. But while less competent and better connected classmates were able to move on to the command class, Daala's progression was denied and she was instead assigned as a datapad assistant and then a galley yeoman, meaning she was forced to work in the kitchen. She became convinced her career was going nowhere, but her analysis of the Tarkin Doctrine had made it to Tarkin himself. He headed to Karita personally hoping to meet the student responsible, and he was dismayed to find the author washing potatoes in a ship's galley. He reassigned Visk, who was seen as responsible for her setbacks, to the planet Sirpar, famous for its oppressive heat and gravity, while Daala himself became, and again this is in the book's words, lovers. This often gets argued as her sleeping her way to the top, but the reason she initially gains their attention when they don't know her gender is her record. This also has to be before the Battle of Yavin, and Daala is at most barely older than Luke and Leia, at most. Daala progressed from Tarkin's aide to the unofficial position of Admiral. She wasn't recognized by Coruscant and the Imperial military as a whole as an admiral, but she held the rank within Tarkin's command structure in the Outer Rim, and he assigned her to the Maw installation, a remote research installation where superweapons like the Death Star were researched and developed. She was occasionally recalled from the installation to assist Tarkin, including an appearance on her Star Destroyer at the Battle of Horuz, where the Death Star superlaser was first used to destroy one of the most powerful ships in the Rebel fleet, a Lucrehall carrier called the Fortressa. Just before Yavin, she was instructed to return to the Maw installation and await further instructions, which would undoubtedly come as soon as she liked this video and subscribed for more. So, 11 years later, Daala had her first contact with the galaxy as a whole since being told to wait for Tarkin's instructions, when Han Solo, Chewbacca, and a boy named Kip Duran arrived on a stolen Imperial shuttle after escaping from the nearby spice mines of Kessel. From them, she learned that not only was Tarkin dead, the Empire as a whole was pretty much dead as well. Furious, Daala began plans to attack the New Republic with her meager fleet, comprised of the ISD's Hydra, Basilisk, Manticore, and her flagship Gorgon, along with some of the superweapons still present at the Maw. Unfortunately for her, one of those superweapons, the nearly indestructible Suncrusher, was stolen by her prisoners with the help of the disaffected scientist Qui Shux. On their way out of the system to warn the New Republic, the Suncrusher flew directly through Hydra's bridge, sending it careening into a black hole and losing Daala a quarter of her fleet before she'd even left. Despite this loss, Daala was able to achieve some victories in the following days. First, she destroyed the fleet of Murith Duel, administrator of Kessel, where Daala emerged from the Maw. Then, after capturing a Corellian corvette, she learned of a new settlement being established on the planet Dantooine, which she raided and destroyed with the use of AT-AT walkers. After learning that Mon Calamari was one of the most important ship-producing worlds of the New Republic, she set out to assault that world as well. She opened by using Gorgon and Basilisk to attack the cities floating on the surface of the planet's oceans, hoping to lure in defending forces away from the shipyard, allowing Manticore to emerge from hiding and destroy them. Unfortunately for her, Admiral Ackbar was present on the planet and recognized the tactic from Tarkin, his former master. Ackbar was able to use an in-production Calamari cruiser to ram Manticore, forcing Daala to retreat, having failed in her primary mission, although she had caused significant destruction on the planet's surface. From there, she fled to the Cauldron Nebula, where she began plotting a final assault on Coruscant, hoping to ram the planet with her 2 remaining capital ships. This planning session was interrupted by the appearance of the Sun Crusher, piloted by a distraught Kip Durin. While she initially engaged the Sun Crusher, she soon realized the Sun Crusher's resonance torpedoes had already been used. These could basically destabilize a sun, or in this case a nova, causing it to explode. She ordered a retreat, but it was too late. Gorgon managed to escape, but Basilisk was caught in the blast and destroyed. With her plan to wreak havoc in the New Republic not going especially well, she attempted to return to the Maw installation, only to find the New Republic already occupying it, so she had failed at her initial mission now too. She was able to remotely download the records of the facility's research, which she'd put to good use later, before destroying the installation by targeting an unstable reactor, and then fleeing to the deep core, which was still controlled by Imperial warlords. The New Republic believed she had died, but in reality she was just severely disappointed. Rather than forming a united front against the New Republic, she'd arrived in the deep core to find a series of squabbling warlords, Pterodok, Harsk, and Delvardis among others, and began acting as an intermediary. While her second-in-command, Kratos, was aboard Harsk's flagship, the Shockwave, Pterodok's fleet attacked, destroying the Shockwave and killing Kratos with it. Harsk then forced Daala into his service, and commanded her to join an attack against Pterodok in reprisal, giving her command of the ISD Firestorm while he was aboard the Whirlwind. Once the attack began, Daala stunned Whirlwind with her ion cannons, and threatened to initiate the self-destruct of the Firestorm, positioning it next to the disabled Whirlwind if Harsk didn't call off the attack. Pterodok's second-in-command, a Vice Admiral named Gilad Pelion, contacted Daala during this standoff, hoping to cooperate with her in ending the self-destructive Imperial infighting. The pair organized a meeting of the 13 most powerful Imperial warlords at Sauce Beacon, hoping to make them unite or at least ally against the New Republic. Instead, they argued for hours. Daala decided they were beyond reasoning, and filled the conference room with gas, killing the warlords. With Pelion now securing the cooperation of Pterodok's forces and her leading Harsk's, they were able to pull in Ivan Cronus, the second command for Delvardis. With the 3 largest forces now aligned under her, the rest of the warlords would have to fall in line, and she began planning a renewed assault on the New Republic. The biggest asset in this new assault came in the form of Delvardis' newly constructed Executor class, the Night Hammer, which Daala renamed to the Night Hammer by putting a K in front of it, given that she hoped to use it first to destroy the Jedi on Yavin. This is, simply put, one of the weirdest battles ever, so I won't go into too much detail here, because it'd take way too long in a biographical video to break it down. But suffice to say, it ended with the death of Cronus and the destruction of the Night Hammer. Utterly defeated once again, Daala resigned her position as Supreme Commander, leaving Pelion in charge of the forces in the known galaxy, while she planned to settle with a group of Imperials on Pedicus Corios. When she arrived at her retirement destination, though, she found the planet abandoned, and soon learned by capturing the droids R2-D2 and C-3PO that the settlement had been effectively destroyed by the deployment of the Death Seed virus by Seti Ashgad and Moff Tolgateles of the Meridian Sector. Daala teamed up with the New Republic, albeit reluctantly, to take down the project of these two, an act which ultimately brought her back into contact with a former lover named Lytus Vorn, who had been serving as a pilot for Ashgad before being imprisoned by Ashgad and Gateles. Her cooperation with the New Republic did earn her some clemency, allowing her to eventually return to the Deep Core with Legis, where they married and eventually had a child. Daala's military career was far from over, however. While Pelion controlled the Imperial factions outside of the core, including the former Pentastar alignment, the Deep Core was once again filled with the squabbling successors of the warlords she had already killed before, dubbed the Replacement Warlords. She set to work uniting them once again, placing herself at Pelion's disposal for the Imperial skirmishes of 17 ABY. Daala and her flagship, Scylla, of unknown type beyond being a frigate, attacked the New Republic from the core, while Pelion attacked from the Rim. She was defeated in the Battle of Columbus by General Bel Iblis, and was once again presumed dead by the New Republic. In reality, she was not dead, she was just in the Maw, establishing a new colony and fleet with herself at the head, called the Maw Irregular Fleet. This fleet was slowly built over time out of various, generally outdated ship types. Although she would go over 2 decades without seeing Pellaeon, she remained staunchly loyal to her old ally, and promised to return and aid him if he ever needed it. During the Vong War from 25 to 29 ABY, her fleet engaged in raids and skirmishes with the Vong invaders, but she still never fully revealed herself to the rest of the galaxy. Pellaeon seems to have filtered her some material, given that she ended up with the Chimera, his own former flagship which had been presumed destroyed in the Battle of Bastion by the Vong. But while the galaxy at large didn't know she was alive, Imperial leadership still did beyond even just Pellaeon, and they considered her a problem. Some of the Moffs attempted to assassinate her, succeeding in killing Vorn and costing Daala an eye, but failing to kill her. Daala was understandably not a huge fan of this, and she began plotting her revenge. The opportunity for that revenge came over 5 years later, alongside the long-awaited request from Pellaeon. Pellaeon was now in his early 90s and losing his control of the Moffs. They'd been promised expanded territory, including the important shipyard world of Bilbringi, by Darth Xkcd, the Chief of State of the Galactic Alliance, in exchange for helping put down the Corellian-led rebellion spanning the galaxy. The first deployment of Imperial forces under this new agreement was to come at Fondor, and Pellaeon believed that the alliance with Xkcd would lead to no good. He asked for Daala and her fleet to remain in reserve, while he led the Imperial forces at the battle. Once Fondor surrendered, Pellaeon ordered Imperial forces to hold their position and respect the ceasefire, but Xkcd ordered essentially the razing of the world. Pellaeon, unwilling to go along with this, was assassinated by his apprentice Tahiri Vela. In his last moments, Pellaeon opened the comm channel to Daala, calling her into the system. She began cooperating with Galactic Alliance defectors under Admiral Cha Niathal to enforce the ceasefire against Xkcd and his Imperial loyalists. Xkcd was forced to retreat, and Daala began dealing with the Imperial usurpers. She'd enlisted the help of Boba Fett and the Mandalorians to capture Pellaeon's flagship, the Bloodfin, killing several of the Moffs who had been acting in support of Xkcd against Pellaeon, including one who had been responsible for the assassination of her husband, Vorn. Daala and Niathal continued to fight against Xkcd, sometimes in loose cooperation with the Jedi Coalition led by Luke Skywalker. Following the death of Xkcd and the end of the war, she was recommended as the temporary Chief of State by Supreme Commander of Xkcd's Galactic Alliance forces, the Bothan Nek Buatu, and was somehow the only person every group could agree on, which seems kind of ridiculous, but it never gets examined that much. She remained in that position for the next 2 years, with an ever-souring relationship with the Jedi Order, while growing the connection between herself, the Galactic Alliance, and the Mandalorians, something some guy named Luke Skywalker believed was aimed at potentially using the Mandalorians to enact a Jedi Purge. She also led unification efforts with the Empire and the rebelling Confederation from the war with Xkcd, who had remained outside of the Alliance even after the war's conclusion. The leaders of the 3 factions commented on how funny it was that all 3 of them were former Imperials, herself leading the Galactic Alliance, Jagged Fel leading the Empire, and Turf Veneer leading the Corellian Confederation. The galaxy hadn't done great over the last few decades. The beginning of the end for Daala came in 44 ABY, when she ordered the arrest of Luke Skywalker, ending with a 10-year sentence of exile, and she began a program to bring the Jedi Order to heel. Her Chief of Staff, Win Dorvin, even warned the Imperial Chief of State and Jedi ally/lover Jagged Fel that Daala intended to use Mandalorians to attack the Jedi, as Luke had feared. She eventually did order her Mandalorian forces to besiege the temple, saying that they had to turn over members of the Jedi Order who had been suffering from a sort of force-induced psychosis. This siege backfired politically, causing mounting public opposition to her and more support for the Jedi. What's more, Luke, still in exile, managed to defeat Abeloth, the being causing the psychosis, and that solved the psychotic Jedi problem. When Daala entered the temple, there were none of the crazed Jedi she'd been promising everyone, and she was forced to lift the siege. Still, she maintained a pair of Jedi that she'd captured earlier, the children of Council Member Corran Horn, encased in carbonite as prisoners to ensure the Jedi's cooperation. Part of her success in controlling the Jedi Order came from the cooperation of the acting Jedi Master, Kenth Hamner. While he was no fan of Daala's, he was still less open to committing acts which could be seen as slightly treasonous. but he was killed by the other Jedi while attempting to stop the Jedi from launching a rescue mission for Luke, along with missions to free the Horn siblings and to help some slave revolts that were being put down by Daala's Mandalorians. A far more activist Jedi Master, Saba Sabatine, ended up in charge of the Order. Saba pretty much immediately organized a coup against Daala. Daala was arrested, and Saba announced to the Senate that a triumvirate was being formed between herself, General Jackson of Starfighter Command, and Senator Haydenat Treen of Kuwat, who'd in fact been involved with a conspiracy by the Imperial Moffs to unseat both Daala and Fel for quite some time already. But Daala's imprisonment wasn't going to last very long. With the help of Boba Fett and the Mandalorians, the deposed Daala was able to escape from prison and began plotting with the Moffs to overthrow Jagged Fel. This involved cooperating not just with Moff Lesserson, who had been secretly inciting the slave revolts through a front organization to undermine Daala as chief of state. This was the main part of that conspiracy I just mentioned, which had been designed to overthrow her. But she also had to work with Moff Gateles, who she had cooperated with the New Republic against over 30 years prior. Apparently this is not the way to gain loyal allies, since Gateles secretly turned against her and began assisting Jagged Fel. This culminated in the stalemate battle between Daala and Fel over the planet Xkcd 2, with Daala supported by most of the Moffs and their own forces, while Jagged had support from the core of the Imperial fleet and the newly revealed Empire of the Hand fleet. With nobody clearly able to gain an upper hand, and with the Empire once again devolving into infighting, Daala decided to offer something unheard of in the Empire, an election. Fel accepted and began his final plot with Gateles, who was still not revealed to have turned against Daala. During the live debates for the election, Fel accused Daala of housing experiments to create a youth serum by Gateles in her headquarters. She strongly denied this and called Fel a liar, but Gateles backed him up. Daala was entirely discredited, and Fel surprised everyone by resigning his post as chief of state and withdrawing from the election, instead endorsing Admiral Vitor Rej, who was able to easily win despite his surprise at being nominated in the first place. This defeated Daala for good, but likely only because there were just 2 more books left in the Legends universe, and nobody really had a chance to bring her back for the 30th time. Either way, that's going to do it for our Daala Diaries. Thank you for watching, and a special thanks to Marmar for editing this video. Remember to leave a like and subscribe for more if you've enjoyed, and I hope to see you next time.